Welcome to this presentation. The purpose of this presentation is to help clarify the connection between ethos, pathos, logos, and the PEAS method that we've been using for our argumentative essays in this class. So, if you think back to what PEAS stands for, point, evidence, analysis, summary, you might be wondering, where are these appeals, ethos, pathos, and logos, likely to show up? And the answer is, honestly, it could show up anywhere in the essay. However, I think it's especially important to focus on how you're using ethos, pathos, and logos within the evidence and the analysis portions. And I want to talk about those portions more in depth. So the evidence portion, what does it do? It proves your main point. The main point by itself isn't convincing, so you need to support it with evidence. Evidence could be real life examples, hypothetical examples, specific sensory details, numbers, percentages, quotes, or paraphrases from credible sources. I'm hoping that as I'm reading this, you're hearing things that make you go, hey, these things remind me of ethos, pathos, logos. And I hope that that was happening for you. When I read this within the context of those appeals, I read that line of real life examples, hypothetical examples, specific sensory details. I automatically think of pathos, those appeals to emotion, because real life things, real people, even made up people, make us care. We care about people. And so that usually evokes some sort of emotion. And sensory details, like those are specifically to evoke a feeling in you. And then when I read the next lines, numbers, percentages, quotes, or paraphrases from credible sources, I'm hoping for you too, that really screams logos, this appeal to logic, to facts, figures, that kind of thing. But as I'm thinking through these, really, what I had originally labeled as pathos, those examples, hypothetical examples, those too can be logos. And so sometimes what you write is going to do double duty. It could be pathos and logos. But evidence, what you're giving to support your argument, that's often where people are trying to bring in pathos and logos. So if you're trying to get someone to care, maybe you're really working on bringing in examples that are going to evoke an emotion in them, pathos. Or if you're trying to prove your point logically, you're going to bring in logos in your evidence. And interestingly enough, at the same time you're doing logos and pathos, you're sneakily getting ethos in there, because the evidence you choose to give, like the choices you make about that evidence and the way in which you present that evidence, it reflects on you. It shows the reader who you are and how much faith they should put in your argument. And so think about it. If you are citing the Center for Disease Control for evidence, people are going to think about you and your argument differently than if you're citing your little brother, Bob, right? The evidence from your little brother, Bob, unless he's an epidemiologist, and the CDC, like, we're going to think about it differently. So the type of evidence you choose and the way in which you present it, those build ethos. So analysis, let's talk about that a bit. An analysis that's here, it explains evidence by itself, though, isn't enough. Your reader may not see how the evidence relates to the point, so you need to analyze it, explain how it supports the point. And I hope that at this point you're starting to hear logos. Analysis is all about helping readers understand the logical connection between the evidence and the points you are making and your overall argument. So it's all about building those logical connections. Analysis is logos. But ethos sneaks back in because presentation matters here too. The way that you present your analysis affects how readers view you as reliable and worth trusting. So if your analysis of evidence is to say, this guy's stupid and he smells like Cheetos, well, that's going to make us think something about you as well. So, how are you presenting this analysis, your opinion, your connection between ideas? That builds your trustworthiness. Okay, sorry, that last slide wasn't supposed to be in there. So, I want to go to examples and talk about how logos, pathos, ethos, how they show up in paragraphs. And so I grabbed a paragraph from an essay about consumerism. And this is kind of an interesting one in terms of logos, because when we think of logos, we think of, facts and figures. But if you quickly skim this paragraph, it doesn't have any facts and figures. However, that doesn't mean that logos isn't happening here. It's just happening in kind of interesting ways. So, this first part that I underline, why would this be so important? It begs the question. It's assuming that the reader is asking themselves this question. And it implies that what comes next is going to be an explanation, a logical explanation for why this is so important. So it's automatically triggering our brain to say, hey, logic is coming, which in itself is logos. And then right after that, believe it or not, the prediction was correct. We get logos. And it's interesting. I'm going to read I'm going to read this section to you. And it doesn't sound like logos, but it is. So because momentous memories are not something that can be produced or purchased, memories are inherently priceless, and their worth is within each individual that possesses them. Our mental shoebox of moments can be pulled out and replayed like a favorite retro movie whenever we need or choose. Our memories can offer us comfort in times of loneliness or encourage us when we need a boost of motivation. So, she's talking about memories and a mental shoebox of moments. This functions as logos because she's setting up a mental model or a logical pattern for us to use to think about this issue. And so, even though it doesn't sound maybe like logos, it is because she is building logical connections for us. All right, and down towards the bottom, again, we get a little bit more logos. She cites a source, and then she is connecting that source and the point of the whole paragraph to her thesis and the point that she made at the beginning of this paragraph. So that connection to the point you're making, the connection to your thesis, that counts as logos as well, because it helps us see connections, logical connections. All right, pathos. So our emotional appeals. In this same essay, in this same paragraph, you're going to see that parts that I just told you were logos are also pathos. So back to this mental shoebox of moments. It is functioning as pathos because think of a shoebox, and like we store things in a shoebox when they're really sentimental. So it sets us up to feel sentimental. And then the idea, the image of pulling it out and going through things, it's already making us go, oh, yeah, I've gone through my things. I know what that feels like. It feels good. And then she talks about replayed like a favorite retro movie. How much do you love watching your favorite retro movie? I don't even want to admit what my favorite retro movie is, but I'm just saying the 80s were important to me. So those little phrases, words, that metaphor that she's using, it evokes emotion and memories from us. So it's working as pathos. And then she goes on, she says, memories can offer us comfort in times of loneliness, encourage us when we need a boost of motivation, establish more understanding within ourselves. This is interesting because these are kind of universal feelings that we want, right? So she's evoking our empathy. We know what it feels like to want those things. We want those things for ourselves. And so she's getting us to feel a certain way. And that counts as pathos as well. All right. So, ethos, I'm actually going to turn to a different paragraph from a different essay on consumerism. And it's kind of interesting how this person uses ethos. So, this first one where it says, and I'm going to mispronounce this name, Huda Katan, an Instagram influencer. So it's kind of interesting. We don't tend to think about Instagram influencers being super likely to show up in formal research essays. But this is an essay about consumerism and people influencing others. So it kind of makes sense to bring up an Instagram influencer, and it implies what level of importance she is within her context to see that she has 22 million followers. That's a lot of people. So whether or not you respect this person, she could be the best person in the world, by the way. I don't know who this is. But the fact that this person has 22 million followers means that she's doing something right and has a lot of people listening to her. Therefore, we should pay attention to this information about her. And then this next part, it says 50 million followers posted a sponsored picture. The popularity of the brand will skyrocket. Even if only 1% of that celebrity's follow base actually purchases the product, that's still 500,000 new customers for the brand. That technically is logic, right? It's making a logical connection, showing the connection between points. However, what it's telling me about this reader is also, this author is also really important because it's saying this person understands this point and how it matters and is capable of showing me in easily comprehensible numbers, which is saying a lot because, hello, I'm an English teacher. So it's saying that this person can make this understandable to me using logic. I'm willing to trust this person more because of that. So it also builds ethos. And then down below, the last one, it says the University of Colorado Boulder discovered. This person, in introducing the quote, points out that it comes from the University of Boulder. And what that does is it makes us more likely to trust the quotation and the information that comes after it because culturally we tend to, and especially in academia, we tend to trust universities and their research. So it's highlighting that we should trust the character of the people who produce this information, right? So it's like double layer ethos. It's you should trust me because I am using a credible source, and you should trust, or like this is a credible source because it is a university. And, when you become an expert in your field, you can use your ethos like by saying, hey, I'm this super famous astrophysicist and you should believe me. But we're talking about a time in our lives right now where you're building your credibility. And so sometimes we need to borrow credibility from other people, and highlighting other people's credentials, other people's respectability, other people's ethos is a way of borrowing their ethos for our own purposes. So when somebody's impressive and you're quoting them, highlight what makes them impressive. Are they a doctor of something? Are they an editor? Are they a specialist in? highlighting those things borrows their ethos. So I hope that the connection between ethos and P's is a little clearer, and please feel free to reach out if you ever want to discuss it in more depth.